I'm Erin Lawler Patterson, the Goodness Chick. I'm an international speaker, podcaster, counselor, author, and proud part of the Mental Health News Radio Network. Join me on the journey of empowering you to live life with an overflowing cup rather than an empty one. We look at mental health, self-care, addiction, relationship, and wellness, where we use our challenges to fuel us rather than consume us.
Boom. All right. So today's episode, always excited to tape, but I get even more excited when I get to reconnect with alumni, with students that I knew back in the day. This gentleman, it's been, we've said maybe 9-10 years since we've seen each other. Riley Alber, who is nothing short of fantastic human being. And I will say his whole family really just knocked my socks off when I first met them years ago. In South Jersey, just people that were down to earth, humble, box burners, and people that were just brought such light to the world. So Riley is the owner of the Wilmington Compost Company. Boom, Riley, welcome today, my friend.
Thank you, Erin. Thank you so much for having me. It's wonderful to see your face via Zoom. Great to just catch up. It's been so long and loving to get to catch up and just speak with you. You've always had such an influence on my life personally, since back in the high school days, and as I've continued on into, I guess you'd call it, my future to the present, but also the family. So thank you so much for the kind words, and really excited to join you today.
And I'm excited to have you here. So I've been following you on social media. You're under Wilmington Compost Company. You're based in Wilmington, North Carolina. I want to say, you grew up in South Jersey, right? How did the road lead you to North Carolina, and on top of that, to this company, and what do you do?
Yeah, great question. So how did I really come to North Carolina, make my way down south, as a lot of folks would call it? Really, it started with my love for the beach, love for the outdoors and the water. And as my older brother and older siblings were looking at college options, I was fortunate to tag along on some of those trips. And so as my oldest brother came to look at the University of North Carolina, Wilmington, I was along on the trip and just fell in love with the area. In 2011, graduating high school, I ended up coming down to UNCW, University of North Carolina, Wilmington. And long story short, ended up studying environmental science, natural resource conservation and management, along with a minor in GIS, geospatial information systems. So a little bit map making, as we'd call it nowadays, but looking at remote sensing imagery and different data points to produce maps. Cool. Coming out of school, did a little bit of traveling in Australia and Indonesia, and through getting out and getting overseas, really, it was kind of cool on the trip. Australia, we had a really great first world example, especially take it to the business side, waste management. Okay. And so then Indonesia was more or less the complete opposite, a very lack of waste management efforts, kind of burning piles on the sides of the roads, right on the beaches. And so through that, I ended up coming back stateside and really just reevaluating what it was that struck my heart chords, as a lot of people would say. And one of those was just living off the land and being connected to the land, and wanting to make a difference with the environment and with the earth. I've always felt I have a conscience that when I lay my head down at night, I like knowing that I'm making a positive impact, doing good. And so as I came back and started to get my feet solidified in the sand, per se, in life, I really wanted to do something that was impactful and felt good. And so I eventually made my way onto an organic farm. And really, that's where the vision for Wilmington here is very service industry based. And so I started kind of looking at a larger picture and seeing this problem, or not to say problem, but this opportunity to create greater good with some of the resources that at the current time were being viewed as waste. Mm-hmm. And so that's when then I started the Wilmington Compost Company, which we are a food waste collection and removal service. So a little bit about that. We provide receptacle containers for the residential and commercial communities here in Wilmington, North Carolina. And we collect all of your food waste and compostable materials. So really paper goods, as well as any of your to-go containers from restaurants or cafes, juice bars. And then that leads me into the next aspect of what we do. We also partner with Eco Products, which is one of the largest compostable packaging manufacturers here in the United States, and also another one called BioBags. And these two manufacturers, Eco Products manufactures serviceware packaging products, so to-go containers, and breaking them down and returning them back to the soil. So more or less trying to change that viewpoint from waste to the landfill. You hit a few words right on the head there with just starting small. Small steps always lead to the bigger step, right? And with that, whether it's taking a reusable bag to the grocery store and starting there, to riding your bicycle once a day to the cafe instead of driving a mile to the cafe. Really, any small step goes such a long ways nowadays in reducing our carbon footprint and just our overall impact. So I really think that's a beautiful point to make, because a lot of the times we immediately believe that we need to take large strides and make large attempts at big change, but really sometimes the best thing for us is just to start small. And I always try to preach that when we're in schools and just talking with folks, because also you shouldn't feel guilty. I think nowadays when we talk about a lot of environmental issues, people gain a sense of guilt for actions, when you shouldn't feel guilty if you're not taking all the steps maybe that you can, or you can't afford to take all the steps that you may wish to, or just that it's not possible to, say, compost.
Right.
You may not have an option for, say, a service, but you may be able to make a backyard pile that you may not need all the tumblers and, say, pieces of heavy equipment, but you can still divert your food waste in a very small scale that will truthfully impact your footprint. And so just any step.
I look at it
lines.
as like little big steps with life, right? You're at a park, you see rubbish, you're out, whatever.
It's the ripple effect.
It's the ripple effect.
You start with a stone hitting the water, and it starts small, but the circle grows bigger.
It does. And it's not allowing ourselves to think, well, somebody else will do it, because that mindset, I think, with so many things in life, is the easy way out. And I don't care who you are, people are watching us, whether it's your kids, whether it's your siblings, whether it's your spouse, your friends. What actions are you going to take to change the world? And okay, so just asking in terms of like, you've always been a bit out of the box, right? You had a passion for nature. You felt that connection even as a kid. And it was not always knowing where that passion would lead you, right? To like owning what you're in Wilmington, but you followed your passion.
Yeah.
And along the way, because we talked a little bit about this before we hit record, was the aspect of fear and how you took that step and you followed your passion, even though you didn't know what the next step was. So I guess my question being like, what was it that drove you? And what was it that you kind of allowed yourself to follow a passion that didn't always necessarily have a clear next step to it?
Yes. Okay. So I think what drove me was just that fact that I could follow my passions. I'm very fortunate that my family, my community that surrounds me encourages, as our parents tell us, you are who you hang out with. I was just fortunate that the people I was hanging out with always encouraged me to follow those passions of mine. And was it always easy? No. I think as we grow up through life and we go through the transitions of different phases in life, we can lose those passions and visions that we once held on to or felt. And I must admit, I think through life, I've had a great kind of just previous few years that have led me to where I feel as though I am today. I had to lose myself to then find myself in a way. And I think a lot of folks go through that in life, is they come through a period where you question who you are, what it is you want to do. And through that time, if you are willing and able to allow yourself the time to dissect all of what life's throwing at you and really are able to reflect internally who it is that you are as a person and what it is that inside of you drives you to that place of happiness, then you need to follow that, because otherwise we'll live a life that really may put money in our pocket, may allow for us to, do some of the things we want to do, but at the end of the day, do they always put a smile on our face? And growing up, I feel as though I was fortunate to watch some folks around, the community in New Jersey area where it's a little bit quicker of a pace of life, to where I think it's sometimes we end up missing what is it that makes me happy, and chasing that. So it's been a long road to get to the point, which I think everyone has a long road before they find whatever it is in life they're looking to find, brought happiness into our lives. And so that has been what has allowed me to follow the passion and not the fear. Right. And then you mentioned that aspect of fear. And I think the aspect of fear is very real, especially once you become an entrepreneur, business owner, right? There's this fear of
semi-frightening. Yeah.
It can be very frightening. But as you mentioned earlier, it's not allowing that 4-letter word fear to bring a negative aspect into your life. It's taking that 4-letter word of fear and turning it into the drive and the fire that kind of gets you motivated. I had a mentor as I was starting my company. He was a gentleman from Charleston, South Carolina. He ran a very similar hauling service that I offer. And he shared the words with me: don't let the fear of tomorrow stop you from taking the actions you need today. And I found they've resonated with me ever since. Because I truly do think that no matter where you are in life, every day presents something new, presents something unknown. As much as we may try to line up our schedules and create patterns in our lives and routines, daily routines, life presents the unknown. And I think that's the beautiful thing about life. Change is the only constant. And so not allowing that fear or unknown of what tomorrow may bring, whether that's a phone call from a customer or truck breaking down, something happening that's out of our control. It's really focusing on what can we do today that will just better set ourselves up for tomorrow.
But that's connected to growth with so many things. And I know when we were talking about the fear factor, like, you had said, where it could be a fire instead of that negative connotation attached to it when we talk about fear, but how it really, I think if we're doing life right, there has to be times that we're afraid, that fear is a factor, because if we're always lacking that, we're doing something wrong and we're not growing. We're not pushing ourselves and we're not stretching. And I think some people might feel that they're fine with that. I think deep down inside, they're not. Fear is, I think, a healthy part of life if we let it be.
Yeah.
Different
and
aspects.
I would agree. I think fear, because a lot of people, they think fear is not natural. Fear is one of the most natural feelings that we get. That's why when you talk about instincts, we have the fight or flight instinct. So we fight, but we also flee when there is that fear. But there can be fear when we stand and fight. So it is a very natural feeling or sense that if we talk about it, which is another kind of an issue with society nowadays, is we tend to steer away from these topics that tend to really strike our emotions. And so if we don't gain an understanding that being fearful is okay, then we'll continue to kind of see the refraining from taking actions or taking those next steps that may be challenging or out of the norm completely. So I do believe it's a matter of talking and just letting people know it's okay to be fearful, just like it's okay to be sad, or okay to, as we were saying, maybe not be able to take every sustainable step that you may wish to see in your life.
It's good stuff, though. It's in terms of like our quality of life that I think, I know there's a lot of people that are just kind of treading water, and where it's like fear, I just don't want to push it. I just want to be safe. And I don't even know if that's the easier route, because in the end, I think there's a whole lot of regret. And I do believe, like you were saying in the very beginning of the episode, like when you go to bed at night, being able to like say, did I make a difference in the world? I believe all of us, sometimes it's hidden, deeper than for others, have that innate wanting to like, I want to make a difference. I want to feel like I'm not just clocking in and clocking out with life and doing something. And this is where all these different things, pieces kind of come together. We're taking that step back and reflecting a little bit, how am I living my life, and where is fear, in part of this, and what am I doing to do my part with the world and following my heart.
Yeah. Farming shared a lot of similar concepts as surfing and similar connections. And so too, I think, I would love to bring in the aspect of when we discuss fear and mental health and physical health, I think too, a lot of them stem from, right, our overall health in general. And I think we find a lot more fear and a lot more reasons to hold back when we're really not holistically healthy. Maybe we focus on one aspect of health a little more so than another, but farming and reconnecting to food, where my food came from, how it was grown, how many hands touched it before I consumed it, how that food made my body feel, to then ultimately how that food made my body feel, to then my body working, ultimately made my mind feel. Everything, you start to realize, is very interconnected, and we need to allow for that connection to take place. And when we ignore it and try to, as humans, we try to control a little bit more than what we can or maybe should try to control, if we allow nature to play its course, I think we'll find a healthier population, a healthier society, and also a healthier environment. And so I wanted to bring in that aspect of the farm and food, because that to me was a core center point to making all of those larger connections to the bigger pictures in life for me. Not to say they're for everybody, but I found that when I became connected to my food again and how it was grown, where it was grown, I became more connected to my community. I became more connected to the earth again. And so that was where I found this realization of, wow, when we feel connected and feel healthy mentally and physically, life just seems to be a whole lot better and more beautiful. And so, I wanted to bring that up because I think that's a beautiful, a huge.
So huge. It's so huge. And it's like, I think I am confident it's underutilized. One of the first things I did when we moved to Eastern Florida was I found out where I could find my dairy products, meats, vegetables, everything that I get is locally sourced. It comes from a farm. And I believe it is so massively important to know where your food comes from, right? There's been articles out about, and I just have issues with this, where, you can buy your chicken for 89 cents a pound, but it's gone through processing in China. like that have no regulations, and that could be a whole nother podcast episode, but it's like, what do you, what, like, where are you getting? And I know financially they can be a challenge, but I will say this, like, I'm driving up to a local farm establishment here. It's about 20 minutes south of me in Fort Pierce. And I'm loading up on fruits and vegetables that I can get, like most of it probably less expensive than if I went to the local grocery store. And it's keeping me socially distant, but it's also like, what am I putting in my body? I want to know that when my son eats blueberries, they haven't been sprayed with toxins. And I want to know that, like, you know, this hasn't been sitting somewhere for 3 years and it still tastes good, but like our bodies, I believe, like you had said, dude, the holistic thinking, mind, body, spirit, and no one's perfect. I will never be super 100% with what I'm eating, but I'm going to give it a go as much as I can, because I know it connects with my mental wellness. And if I just eat crap all the time, I feel crappy and I'm tired, and my mental mindset correlates with what we put in our body. So I know you were kind of like saying, well, you know, I know this is like, it's massive. And this is one of the things I dig about following you on Instagram and seeing your stuff on Facebook, where you're changing the world and shedding light on how everything's connected. Where are you getting your food? Are you supporting your local farmers and your small business, and just encouraging each other? And it absolutely plays a role in how we feel about ourselves, how we sleep at night, and our mindset.
Yes.
Right. I just went on a rampage, dude, but it's just.
I love it. I love it though. Cause, you know, all the concepts you mentioned just are so true in a lot of ways, whether that's from right now in a pandemic, social distancing, and immediate health, right? Also take it a step further. How do we build our personal health resilience against COVID-19? It's building our immunity through locally sourcing foods that are nutrient rich and dense. You know, you mentioned purchasing groceries off the shelf, and yeah, there's sources that are more beneficial than others, but a lot of large scale agricultural operations don't really focus, right, on the nutritional value of the product they're putting out. They're focused on producing enough volume to supply their customer base. Mm-hmm. And so when you shift the focus from there to the actual value of food, I've always found you tend to find that with your local farmers. Your local farmers are the families down the road that care about what their kids are eating, and ultimately really what you're eating. So I love hearing that when you moved, you found your local farmers market, because I think that's very important when we talk about becoming reconnected to our food. And I say reconnected because I think as a society, as a whole, a global whole, I believe we've become a little disconnected from our food sources, how our food should be grown, and just food practices overall. And when we become reconnected, we become friends with our farmers. We know what they're utilizing or spraying on their fields, what they're not, hopefully. And I find those connections and realities real with the local farming community. And I find the disconnections with the grocery stores and the large agricultural operations. And, you know, some other great options in communities: local farmers market, local co-ops. Your local co-op folks are beautiful people, or even just your small scale local. I need to change my diet. Take the mindset of I need to find out how my food's being grown and where it's coming from. And I think that will allow for a closer connection to our food sources, our local communities, and our farming communities overall, because our farmers are the ones that do provide us our food, our nutrients, and our well-being at the end of the day. And so, especially during times like this, as you had mentioned, who's shining and coming through and really providing for our country, for the world right now? Those are the farmers, right? Yeah. And more or less, they're the small scale local farmers that are bringing produce maybe once, maybe twice, maybe 3 days a week to different community outlets to provide, I'll say, nutrient-rich food sources. Because a lot of the times we may buy stuff off the shelf, but depending on how it's grown, how long it's been in transit to the shelf, it's losing its nutrient value. A lot of the times it may not even hold a nutrient value. So really trying to understand where your food comes from, I think, should be one of the first questions we should ask ourselves when looking into a new area to live, or we may already have moved, or just you live there, you love it, but you may have never looked into who your local farmers are. But I do believe
it's a really
that
cool thing. I mean, like we've been in where I'm in Vero now about 9 months, and the connection through the co-op we're in, that we have vegetables and fruit delivered every other week, and it's really super reasonable. Actually, Thursday meeting up for every other week, we go get a milk and dairy delivery from local dairy farmers. Like, they are just really good human beings. And my mom and dad have been in the farming industry for 15 years. They've done, they have cattle and pigs and chickens. They're phasing out of it, and they've done dairy. But I'll tell you, 15 years ago, when I would like listen to my dad with stories when he would go to the processor and learning how other very big corporations treated their animals, what they fed their animals and pumped them up with, I was like, false. You know, I am going to be careful. I want to know where my meat comes from. And here we're connected where it's small farmers. That's where I get my beef, I get my chicken, you know, and I feel good about what I'm eating. I do. I think the more we get connected with what you guys are doing, local farmers, it makes us, like you've said, you know, a number of times, connected to the community. We feel a part of something, and that directly connects to our mental health. Because right now, I think with the whole pandemic and distancing ourselves from people and not seeing people we usually see, a lot of people are just feeling weird and off. And I'm not a doctor, but I do know that if we are more connected with what we eat and what we expose ourselves to, it makes us feel better as human beings. Yeah. And, you know, I super duper do.
And I think too, when you do that, your community grows.
Mm-hmm.
So, like for me, I feel so fortunate because not only now do I know the local farmers and are great friends with all the local farmers, but it continues deeper into the community. So then you start to understand, all right, who are the local restaurant owners and chefs that are supporting these local farmers, right? And really cooking unbelievable dishes sourced within a 20-mile radius of the city. And so really also, you know, taking it that step further into just the community as a whole, there's a lot of folks that do take the extra step. And you mentioned earlier, you know, the financial ability. And that's one thing that's very real. A lot of folks, you know, tend to think, and it is organically raised, organically grown produce may be a little more expensive, but it is for a very good reason, right? And then if we think about financial priorities in our lives overall, I think we'd find more comfort in knowing that food is probably a little bit more of a priority than Netflix or the third vehicle or the second vehicle at the household. And so really, you know, looking at the bigger picture as to what is it that we care about as a human in our lives? Is it our physical well-being and mental well-being through sourcing nutrient-rich local foods? Or is it, and spending that extra dollar to do so? Or is it, you know, having Netflix and Hulu on the TV every night for when you get done the workday, and you enjoy that more so than feeding your body more beneficial food, as you mentioned, to get out and support those businesses? Because right now, with everything that we're experiencing, these are the folks that are getting hit hard.
Yeah, it's not
Your
Walmart.
large,
It's not, like, a Kroger.
They don't have the backing that
They
the
don't have the
large
backing.
corporations do.
No.
And so it's a very important time to get out and spend that extra dollar within the community. And because, yes, I think when you spend it in the community, it returns to the community. As we talked earlier briefly, that circular economy. And as I always say in dealing, working with compost and food waste and really organic waste recycling, we always wish to achieve a closed loop system, right? Not allowing these resources to leave the loop because they're beneficial within the loop. And so that's where viewing materials as waste versus resource, or a priority versus a non-priority, local food versus non-local food. And so it'll be very fascinating to see how we all handle coming out of, post-COVID, and find as I like to say, it's going to be finding a new way of normal life. I don't think we'll return to a normal life. And so that being said too, I encourage any listeners right now to try to maybe look into where the local farmers markets are, because it is a great point in life to where we're all experiencing a lot of changes in our personal daily lives, that it may be a good opportunity to try to change one little small step within that daily routine. That could then create a bigger impact in your personal life, as well as the environment and global population as well.
It's good things. Wise words, my friend. Wise words. Riley, I want to say thank you so much for joining us today, and shedding your insight, and just the importance of following our heart, using fear to fuel us, and just being true to ourselves, and knowing that little steps are big steps in the scheme of life. And I want to say to my listeners, keep on keeping on, my friends, and knowing that our little big steps can change the world. And wishing you a plethora of peace, love, and goodness, my friends.
If you enjoyed today's episode, there's a lot more encouragement and life-kicking strategies on goodnesschick.com. Have a great day, my friends.